This playthrough is rated M for mature.
Greetings and salutations, viewers. Vauldemare back here with our Hakuōki Stories of the Shinsengumi. Last time we found out our father was still alive, but the Shinsengumi had ran off, but our father was still alive, and then when we found him, there was no reunion of hugs and kisses, only a father who had been creating Furies because he wanted to, and he had drunken his perfected water of life and fully given into his demon desires. But strangely enough, Kazuma helped us fend him off, but he got away in the process. Now we're just figuring out what to do now. Let us begin. There was an accusatory tone in his voice, but Amagiri seemed to either not care or not notice. I was looking for Kodo. He went on to explain he had heard my father had sold his services to the Imperial Army after Amagiri and Kazuma left Satsuma employ. Amagiri had decided to look into the truth of the rumor and chosen not to discuss it with Kazuma until he was more sure of the facts. He had also discovered that a large force of Furies was already on its way to Edo. After what my father had told me, it seemed that Amagiri's rumors were almost certainly true. I was still stunned from all that had just happened, but I heard Kazuma say with venom that the Furies were mindless beasts that had no right to exist. Even the normally mild-tempered Amagiri seemed to agree, and claimed he could not allow my father to continue unimpeded. I can't believe it. I had seen with my own eyes just how much my father had changed, but a part of me, the part that had remembered how kind and loving he had been, that remembered all the good times we had shared during my childhood, refused to accept it. It was nothing more than a sick joke. It had to be. No, I knew what the truth was. I just didn't want it to be the truth. You can believe it or choose not to. It's up to you. I looked at him startled, and he continued. My father, he told me, was not my father at all. Though we were both demons from the Yukimura clan, my father was not related to me by blood. Dun dun dun! Well, that's just kind of like a random thing to drop the bombshell, you know? Kodo Yukimura is not the protagonist's real father. He adopted and raised her when she was the only surviving member of the destroyed Yukimura clan. No, that's not possible. No, that's not true. It's impossible! I was a direct heir to the masters of the clan, but my father was from a smaller, weaker family. Since it only recently learned of my demon heritage, I was far from knowledgeable about the standings and bloodlines of the various demon families, but it seemed that the demise of the Yukimura was a rather famous story. I desperately wanted his words to be some elaborate lie, but whatever else he was, Kazuma was not a liar. So, I'm the only person who didn't know? Again? Kazuma, Amagiri, and Sen had all almost certainly known the truth about my father. Even if we aren't directly related, that doesn't change the fact that he raised me. Kazuma shrugged. If you say so, but Koda has gone down a dark path. As a demon, it is my duty to kill him. I could hear in his tone that my feelings on the matter were irrelevant. No matter how much I might object, Kazuma had marked my father for death. I had been so flustered since Kazuma's arrival at my house that only then did the question occur to me, why had he come? He had no knowledge of my father's plans, so he would have had no reason to visit our house. Could he have been worried about me? I snuck a glance in his direction. It wasn't possible that the self-centered demon I knew would spare even a moment to worry about someone else. No way. Still, his motives were a mystery. Eventually I gave up on going to Kofu and decided to remain in Edo. I wanted to find the Shinsengumi again, but I couldn't allow my father to continue his plans either. He had to be stopped. Kazuma, Amagiri, and I busied ourselves searching for more information about Kodo's Furies. Time passed, and as April turned into May, we finally found what we were looking for. Our research uncovered the location of my father's Furies, and where they were, he would be. Sen's sources were able to confirm what we'd learned. Finally, the Furies had been found. Kazuma, do you think you could give me some time with him? He stared at me, unreadable. I think that maybe if we talk, I can convince him to reconsider. I had no idea how successful that attempt might be, but I had to at least try. He looked at me silently for several long seconds, and finally nodded. Fine. He had given me my chance. Thank you. I knew very well that if I failed, my father would die. Kazuma had no compunctions about slaughtering him along with the rest of the Furies. There wouldn't be a second chance. Together, Kazuma and I snuck into the mansion where information had said my father was hiding. Hinata! I'm here to stop you, father. If you set Edo on fire, hundreds of people will die. Why does the Imperial Army have to kill so many innocent people? It seemed a perfectly legitimate question to me, but my father frowned and sighed with disappointment. When he spoke, it was with the same voice he'd used to explain difficult things to me when I was a child.
お前にはまだわからないだろうが、これがこの国のためなのだよ。
You may not understand it yet, but what I am doing is necessary for the good of our country. No. Weren't the people the country? How could killing them serve them?
ここで出会えたのも導きだ。さあ、私と一緒に来るのだ。
It is a sign that we meet here again. We met each other here. Come with me. What kind of sign could mean that I should help you to murder innocent people? I felt my voice rising to a scream. I can't go with you, father. Even if we weren't related by blood, I had always loved Kodo as my real father, but the look he gave me then was cold and loveless. Why are you so desperate for me to come with you? I'm not even your real daughter. I fixed my eyes to his, looking for some sign of something. Is it because you want to use me? Because I'm the heir to the clan?
知ってしまったのか。そうだ。お前が本家の強い鬼の血筋の娘だからだ。
So you know, I see. Yes, you're right. You're strong blood. I need that. I felt my heart break.
その強い鬼の血を私の羅刹に役立てよう。
Your blood will help me improve my Furies. Father.
よく言う。犬の分際で。
That's enough out of you, worm. His voice echoed through the room as Kazuma stepped out from the shadows, his eyes piercing my father like a pair of steel blades.
風間様、あなたも来ていたのか。
Lord Kazuma, you've come as well? The corner of his mouth twitched, hinting at a smile.
言わせてもらいますが、あなたも薩摩藩に雇われ、人間のために働いていたではないか。
You're hired by the Satsuma domain as well.
私と何が違うのだ。
You've worked for the humans. How is what I'm doing so different? Kazuma sneered.
はるか昔、幕府に追われていた我ら鬼の一族をかくまってくれた薩摩藩には恩義がある。
I owed the Satsuma domain a debt. They hid and protected my clan long ago when the Shogun wanted us eradicated.
この度はその借りを返すため、倒幕までは手を貸したまでのこと。
All I've done is settle that debt. Small horns grew from Kazuma's forehead, and in the blink of an eye, his hair was white.
だが貴様の行為は鬼の仁義にも当てはまらない。犬畜生以下だ。
Your actions do not benefit a demon. You are nothing more than a disgusting animal! He spat with contempt, his eyes sparking with anger.
貴様のように羅刹に身を落とし、斧が栄達のために政府に王を振るなど、鬼の恥だ。
You gave in to the false power of the water of life, and you bow and scrape to the government so they might throw you scraps. You have lost your pride as a demon. He drew his sword with a soft, deadly hiss of steel.
今ここで死ね。
Now die! The aura of death and violence that suddenly hung over Kazuma was terrifying. I felt my body take a step back.
その上からの態度、前から気に入らなかったのだ。
You know, I've always despised your holier-than-thou attitude. He grinned.
西の棟梁たる鬼とはいえ、これだけの数の羅刹を相手にできますか？かかれ！
Even you have your limits. Do you think you can defeat the whole army of Furies? Furies, attack! There was only silence. He yelled again and again, growing more and more desperate. No one came.
自慢のまがい者どもはどうした？
Has something happened to your beloved abominations? A wide, taunting grin split Kazuma's face.
どうなっているのだ？
Damn it, what's going on?
あのようなまがい者、私一人で十分。残りは貴様一人だ。
Your monsters have been taken care of. You are all that remains. Amagiri had destroyed the Furies while Kazuma and I were distracting my father. No matter how far superior Furies were to normal humans, demons like Amagiri and Kazuma were something else entirely. The thought that any number of Furies could defeat them was foolishness.
貴様ら、鬼のくせになぜその力を使わない？その力があれば天下だって取れるものを。
Why? You have such great power. Demons like you could easily rule this country. Why don't you... Father, was this the real motivation behind his actions? Had he been lying every time he spoke of doing something for the sake of his country? You're just trying to take over, aren't you? And these Furies are how you'll do it. My voice shook as I spoke. Kodo fell silent and looked away. He was searching for a way out, but Amagiri had moved around behind him, cutting off any possibility of escape.
それが本性か。ゲロな。
Your true colors at last. Pathetic. His hand tightened on his sword, and he looked at me. Stop him or don't stop him. Alright, here we go. Even odds. Alright, here we go. Even, so apparently I don't want him to stop him. Alright. There was nothing I could say. It was clear now that mere words would never stop my father.
せめて苦しまずに行け。
At the very least, I will see that you die quickly. He stepped forward towards my father. Kodo stood, frozen, for a moment looking desperately for a way out. Then, with a roar of frustration, his eyes glowed red, and he charged. Kazuma did not even bother to stop walking. His sword sang through the air, a brilliant line of pure silver catching my father across his body. He crumpled to the ground and lay still. Kazuma slid his still bloody sword back into its sheath with deathly finality. No. I felt myself running to my father's side, but as I reached out, his body suddenly changed, and all that was left was a pile of white ash. Father. He was gone. But then again, the man who had loved me and raised me as his daughter had been gone for a long time. I told myself that over and over, but did little to fill the aching void in my heart. When did everything go so wrong? My legs began to shake, but before I crumpled to the floor, I felt Kazuma's strong arm wrap itself around me and hold me tight. Kazuma. All of my strength was gone. I couldn't even raise my head. I didn't know what Kazuma was thinking, but I was too tired to do anything but accept his support at face value. He was so kind. There were tears falling down my cheeks. Her life was so peaceful. No fighting, no wars. The more I remembered, the faster the tears came. What changed him?
弱い心を人間に利用されただけだ。
He was used by humans. They corrupted his heart. His voice was quiet, but not quite gentle. Kazuma sighed.
羅刹の利用か。薩長が天下を取ってもすることは徳川の世と変わらない。
Even if the Imperial Army had managed to use the Furies to take over the country, nothing would really change.
結局どいつもこいつも権力と金が欲しいだけの亡者だ。
They're not different from the Tokugawa. All any of them care for is money and power. I'd heard Kazuma bemoan the main failing of the human race plenty of times before, but this felt somehow different, almost as if he was trying to comfort me by saying that it was not my father who was at fault, but the humans who'd used him.
人間とは愚かでくだらぬ生き物だ。
Humans are foolish, pathetic creatures. It's alright. I understand. Even if he'd been set down a dark path by humans, my father had still chosen to follow that path. In the end, he was responsible for his actions. I'm just sad. The tears refused to stop. Kazuma gripped me a little tighter. I know there are bad humans, but not all of them are bad. Some people are willing to risk their lives for much better things than money and power. The men I'd met in the Shinsengumi, at least, certainly didn't fight for greed. I wanted to know what had happened to them. Now that my father was gone, the Shinsengumi was the closest thing to family that I had left. Chapter 6. June 1868. Faced with a long, bloody battle against the superior imperial army, the shogunate decided to surrender Edo Castle. In doing so, they avoided fighting in Edo. However, the army of the shogunate still had fire in its breast and refused to surrender, taking the battle north. In the northeast, an alliance was formed between the forces loyal to the deposed shogunate, called the Northern Alliance. It joined forces of the Aizu and Sendai domains. Northern Alliance, the military and political coalition between the Mitsu, Dewa, Echigo domains formed with the intent of supporting the Aizu and Jona domains, getting them pardoned as enemies of the imperial government. Oh, forgot to read that. Sendai domain, a large influential domain in the northeast governed by Yoshikuni Date, an opposition daimyo leader of the Northern Alliance. The imperial army had taken the advantage and showed no signs of relinquishing it any time soon. The shogunate soldiers were clearly outmatched, and yet they continued to fight. Even the Shinsengumi were routed by the imperial army before they could reach Kofu Castle. Then we heard that Nagakura and Harada had suddenly left the rest of the Shinsengumi, but not why. Okada's condition worsened, and he was sent elsewhere to recover. Kondo was forced to surrender to the imperial army. What was happening to the Shinsengumi? Those were the thoughts on my mind when I arrived at Utsunomiya Castle in June. Utsunomiya, a key location along the Nikko and Oshu routes that chose to favor the side of the new imperial government military after the Battle of Tobu Fushima. Kazuma had remained with me, apparently determined to see the war through to its ultimate end. Amagiri had stayed with us as well, still bound by Sen's orders. Utsunomiya Castle had been taken by the shogunate army for a short time, but was soon recaptured by imperial forces. Great crumbling holes yawned from its walls, spoke to me as the power and brutality of war. To me, of the brutality of war. Dang it, I messed up. I have bad news. Do you want to hear it? I turned to look at him. Kazuma's eyes stared down at me, expressionless. Now he's wearing Western garb. When war had abandoned swords in favor of rifles, soldiers had begun to wear Western clothing. After we left Edo, Kazuma had too. At first they had felt strange, out of place, but in time I'd grown used to them. Please tell me. His voice was quiet when he spoke. Kondo has been beheaded by the Imperial Army. I had no words. He looked away, an almost imperceptible frown on his lips. Whether or not you believe me is up to you. No, it's not that I don't believe you. When we'd heard the news that Kondo had surrendered, I'd known in my heart that it wouldn't end well, but to finally be confronted with that harsh truth was difficult. Do you know where the rest of the Shinsengumi is?
新選組は宇都宮戦に参加した後、会津で戦闘を続けているらしい。どうする?
After they fought at Utsunomiya, they moved to Aizu, where they are currently in battle. He gave me a look that suggested he knew what the next words out of my mouth would be. I want to go to Aizu. By the time we arrived, the Aizu domain had already fallen before the relentless advances of the Imperial Army.
合図も降伏か。よく持った方か。
Aizu surrendered at last, eh? They lasted longer than I expected. I didn't bother to respond. Every time I was confronted with the horrible reality of war, I felt the cracks in my heart widen. Are my old friends in the Shinsengumi all right? Kazuma and I stood there in silence until Amagiri returned.
新選組の行方が分かりました。
I've learned where the Shinsengumi are. Although no longer the direct employee of the Satsuma, Amagiri had been able to use his contacts to gather information from the Imperial Forces stationed in Aizu.
ボナリ峠の戦いにて新選組を率いていた斎藤が死亡。
Hajime Saito died commanding a contingent of Shinsengumi soldiers in the Battle of Bonari Pass. And Will Saito died and Kondo's died, so that's 2 out of the group. Bonari Pass. The Imperial Army marched with forces through this pass to reach Aizu Wakamatsu Castle. I felt a sharp pain run through my heart. The cracks widened a little more. I said nothing, only bit my lip and looked down.
残った大使は土方を筆頭に仙台に移動した模様です。
The remaining men have headed for Sendai under the command of Toshizo Hijikata.
まだあがくか。
Off to continue their helpless struggle, eh? I thought I heard a hint of admiration in his voice. They're still fighting. Surely they knew they couldn't win. Why hadn't the Shinsengumi just given up? Was it possible that their motivation for fighting this war went beyond who won and who lost? There was only one thing I knew for certain. Their hearts were still unbroken.
死に場所を求めているようにしか見えないが、それが奴らの侍ってものなんだろう。
It looks as if they're only searching for a place to die. It looks as if they're only searching for a place to die, but perhaps that is what being a samurai means to them. Yes. Shinsengumi were still fighting for what they believed in. Well, they are still fighting for what they believe in, and they're still around. Perhaps they'll survive till the end. Who knows? But I don't know. Not yet, anyway. With all this new information running through her head, our main character has learned about her fake father, the death of her father, the death of some of her friends, and the continued struggle of the Shinsengumi. All can end as in true sadness. We will find out next time in what may be the final episode of Hakuōki, the stories of the Shinsengumi. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next part.